Howdy folks, Deacon Parsons here. I haven't done a video in a while. I've been dealing with a fairly serious health issue. I hope to get that wrapped up in the next month. I've got a couple longer videos in the works, but I won't be able to get to them till after this health issue's cleaned up and I get all the research done. Just making this quick video because I came across a video by a man named Pat Condell that I found really interesting, and it got me thinking. Now, the name of his video is Free Speech on Campus, and I'll put a link for that in the low bar. I like Pat. He seems to be a straight shooter, and while I don't agree with everything on his channel, I think if he and I were neighbors, we would be fast friends, if sometimes loud friends, because we both seem like we enjoy a good spirited debate. I agree with Pat's basic premise that the politically correct left-wing progressive have overtaken academia, and that with their politically correct nonsense, they've basically changed academia into something that is completely the opposite of what they say they represent. Now, this brought up a couple of items that I'd like to talk about in this video today. The first one is kind of minor, is that Pat uses Christianity as a pejorative to describe what is happening. What he seems to miss is that what's happening to academia right now is the exact same thing that happened to Christianity earlier, which is why Christianity has such a bad reputation. Now, the second item I want to talk about is Pat's contention that these people who are doing this shouldn't have free speech. Now, I agree that they don't deserve it, but I want to discuss the point of whether they shouldn't have it. Just as there are people in university today trying to get an education despite the degraded institution, there are people in Christian groups trying to follow the precepts of Christ despite and without the corrupting influences that have changed love your enemy into hate everybody that doesn't believe like we do. Why is this distinction important? Well, there's a selfish reason and a larger, more important reason. Just as Pat, who believes in the precepts of free speech, free debate, and the exchange of ideas, feels the need to point out that what's happening in universities today shouldn't be happening, those people who are trying their best to live a Christian life within the framework of what they've been left with also want the world to know that those institutions that have corrupted the message of Christ and claim to represent Christianity really don't. But the broader reasons are actually more important. If we falsely label what happened to Christianity and what's happening to academia as integral parts of the institutions, then we let the real reasons go, and the people who are really behind these corruptions are free to do it in other areas. And believe me, they're going to cause more trouble anywhere they can get to. I contend that what's happening to academia today is not a part of the institution. It is a fault found within the humans that make up the institution. And just as it's happening in academia and happened to Christianity, it can happen in any human group. The way I describe this phenomenon is using liberalism as an example. And I divide liberals into two groups, a capital L liberal and a small L liberal. But this can happen with any group. Academia, Christianity, country music, the History Channel, science, hippie communes, anywhere where groups of people get together for a common purpose, this effect can take place. So what is the difference between a small L liberal and a capital L liberal? Well, small L liberals are not ideologues, they're thinkers. They take a given subject, they research it, they look at all the evidence, they decide what evidence they find compelling, what evidence they don't find compelling, and then they reach a conclusion. Now, they know the evidence on the other side of the issue. They can explain to you why they don't find it compelling. When you ask them about their conclusions, they can explain them to you. They are decent enough people that they can disagree without being disagreeable about it. And they're secure enough in their own position that they don't feel the need to force their position down the throats of other people. Small L liberals reach a conclusion on each topic based on the individual topic, which means that all of their conclusions may or may not be liberal. It's entirely possible for them to be liberal on one topic and what would be considered conservative on another topic, because they don't care about ideology, they care about the evidence on each individual topic. Capital L liberals, on the other hand, are ideologues. They're like Inspector Javert from Les Miserables. Now, Victor Hugo said that Javert was a combination of several ideals. Individually, these ideals are good, but they're made evil by Javert's exaggeration of them. Capital L liberals desperately want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be able to go around and tell people what to do, but they either don't have the time, the talent, or the inclination to think of things for themselves. To simplify their life, what they've done is they've simply come to the conclusion that whatever the progressive liberal idea is on any subject, that's right. They've decided that liberal progressive is always correct. They only know what they believe because someone else has told them what the liberal progressive position is. When you ask them to explain their position, they got nothing. All they can do is restate their position a little more loudly and a little more aggressively. They're not secure enough in their position that they can disagree with somebody. As a matter of fact, there's no disagreeing with them at all. If you do not conform to their ideals, you're not just wrong, you just don't have a separate opinion. You're evil personified and you must be destroyed. As I say, these type of people are everywhere and they're into every human institution. If we don't correctly identify the problem, centuries from now, people are going to be using the term academic to describe a narrow-minded bigot, the same way people use Christianity to describe narrow-minded bigotry today. Now, why is this distinction important? Well, because if we don't correctly identify the source of the problem, the solutions can sometimes cause more problems than the original problem. I'm going to use an example from history. During Roman times, there was a lot of vice and corruption that surrounded the Roman baths. Well, when Rome fell, people had associated vice and corruptions with the baths. And they had incorrectly assumed that it was the act of taking the bath that was the source of the vice and corruption. Now, because of that, in the post-Roman era, a lot of people refused to bathe because bathing was a source of vice and corruption. Now, outside of making Europe smell bad for several centuries, we now know that hygiene is an important part of health. So for centuries, misidentifying the bath as a cause of the vice and corruption instead of the people that were at the bath, a lot of people died. Now, the second point I want to make about Pat's video is the most important one. If we advocate for freedom of speech, that's pretty much an all or nothing position. Either we all have freedom of speech or none of us have freedom of speech. Now, this doesn't mean that people can't be punished for their abuse of free speech, but they cannot be censored ahead of time. You can't punish someone for yelling fire in a crowded theater until they actually do it. You can't punish someone for lying until they actually do it. You can't punish someone for slander or incitement to riot or in obstructing someone else's free speech until they actually have done it, and then it can only be punished after due process of law. Another way to explain this is, let's use the illustration of slavery. if we take the position that slavery is inherently evil, the institution of slavery is evil, then we have to remain true to that statement. Now, there may be a certain amount of poetic justice, and it might feel good to say, you know what? We're going to take slave owners and we're going to make them slaves. That'll make us feel good, and that we can, in our mind, will process that as, well, that's only just. However, if we do that, we make ourselves hypocrites. Because if we propose that slavery as an institution is evil, and then impose it on someone, even if it's as a punishment for owning slaves, we've become them. We agree with them that slavery is okay. All we disagree about is who should be a slave. Now, when we reach that point, we're at the same point that Pogo was. He says, we have met the enemy, and he is us. If we advocate for freedom of speech, we have to advocate it for everybody, even those people with whom we disagree, even those people who don't deserve freedom of speech, even those people who are trying to destroy freedom of speech. We have to remain true to the concept and to the ideal. This is Deacon Parsons saying, love your maker, love your mate, and do what's right because it's right, and devil take the hindmost.